December 26, 2004. Banda Aceh, Indonesia. The morning began with a deceptive, humid tranquility. The market was stirring, the muezzin's call had echoed, and along the coast, the early fishermen were already casting their nets into the sparkling sapphire sea. It was a Sunday morning like countless others, perfect and ordinary. But the earth does not respect routines. At 7:58 a.m., the routine exploded. The ground did not merely shake, it liquefied. It became a violent, unpredictable entity. The 9.1 magnitude earthquake, centered hundreds of kilometers away off the coast of Sumatra, was one of the largest ever recorded. It lasted an unthinkably long time, nearly 10 minutes of pure seismic violence. Concrete structures groaned, fractured, and collapsed. People ran into the streets, screaming prayers, convinced that the very architecture of reality was dissolving. When the monumental shaking finally ceased, an immediate, eerie silence descended. A silence born of shock, not peace. The city was wounded, but largely standing. Most people believed the danger had passed. They dusted themselves off, checked on their neighbors, and started the slow, terrifying work of assessing the damage. Their focus was inward, toward the ravaged homes and temples. They did not look toward the ocean. But along the coastline, those few who did look witnessed an event so ancient, so fundamentally wrong, that the human mind struggled to categorize it. The ocean was vanishing, rapidly, aggressively. It was not a slow retreat of the tide. It was an instantaneous siphon. The waterline dropped hundreds of meters in moments, exposing vast, glistening stretches of seabed that had not seen light in millennia. Coral reefs, usually hidden realms of deep blue, now lay exposed, dripping and strange. Fishing boats, moments earlier floating gently, now sat marooned in thick black mud. Curiosity, that fatal human instinct, took hold. Villagers, unaware of the terrifying mechanics of tectonic displacement, began to walk across the newly revealed land. They saw thousands of fish flopping in the tide pools, a strange, rich harvest laid out for them. They moved forward toward the bizarre promise of the exposed ocean floor, drawn by the unnatural spectacle. This sight, beautiful in its temporary, strange geometry, was the final, undeniable warning. The silence that followed the retreat was absolute. It was a crushing, pressurized quiet that swallowed the sounds of the distant, damaged city. But the silence did not last. Far out, where the deep ocean swallowed the light, the energy released by the subterranean rupture was now coalescing. This energy, moving at the speed of a jet plane in the deep water, was transforming into a single, massive displacement of water. Then the sound began. It started as a deep, resonant rumble, a low-frequency moan that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly within the chest cavity. It was unlike any sound heard on land. It grew. It deepened into a mechanical, grinding roar, a noise so vast it suggested colossal movement, like a million boulders tumbling simultaneously down an endless incline. It was the sound of the Pacific Ocean preparing to commit an act of unimaginable geological violence. Those who still stood on the exposed mudflats, now hundreds of meters from the safety of the normal shore, finally turned their attention outward. And they saw it. On the horizon, where the sea should have met the sky, there was only darkness. A single, perfectly straight line that seemed to defy the natural curve of the planet. It was not a wave. A wave breaks. A wave crests. This was a wall. It was impossible. A sheer, vertical mass of black, churning water accelerating toward them. In the deep water, its height had been moderate, but as it dragged across the shallow coastal shelf, that height surged dramatically, compounding the speed and the mass. It was 30 meters high, a dark, moving monolith comparable to a 10-story skyscraper made of relentless liquid. It blocked out the morning light, casting a massive, fatal shadow over the confused, silent land. The speed was horrifying. The wave moved faster than any human could sprint. faster than most cars could accelerate. The time between sighting the impossible vertical face of death and its arrival was perhaps 2 minutes for those inland, and mere seconds for those paralyzed on the newly formed mudflats. For those trapped on the shoreline, these final seconds were not spent running. They were spent staring. The human mind, faced with an existential threat that violates every law of expected reality, often simply freezes. The sight was too enormous, too absolute, to trigger the normal panic response. An unnatural wind preceded the wall. A fierce, superheated gust that smelled of pulverized coral and deep-sea brine. The pressure change was physical, pressing against the lungs. The roar was now total. It was not merely audible. It was a physical force. It shattered glass kilometers inland before the water even arrived. It ripped the leaves from palm trees. Then, the impact. 15 minutes after the earthquake, the 30-meter wall of water slammed into the coastline of Banda Aceh. It did not crash. It did not wash over. It vaporized the shore. The energy delivered by that volume and speed was equivalent to tens of thousands of tons of high explosives. Concrete buildings that had survived the seismic shaking were not simply disassembled. They were instantaneously reduced to dust and flying shrapnel. Houses were erased from their foundations, not left standing as ruined shells. The cityscape, in the immediate vicinity of Ground Zero, ceased to exist. The water was no longer clear seawater. It was a thick brown slurry of mud, oil, vehicles, industrial debris, pulverized trees, and human remains. It was a colossal, churning liquid blender operating with absolute efficiency. The mass of the wave was so great that when it hit, it did not stop. It barreled inland, maintaining its apocalyptic height for several kilometers, pushing the sheer weight of the Indian Ocean across the island. Cars were tossed like toys. Multi-story hotels crumbled as the water's leading edge hit them. In under 10 minutes, the entire coastal geography of Banda Aceh was transformed into a flat, unrecognizable plain of debris, chaos, and silence. When the water finally spent its monumental energy and began the terrifying journey of recession, it dragged everything back with it. Cars, trucks, the pulverized remains of entire neighborhoods. It was an unstoppable undertow pulling millions of tons of waste back into the sea. The 2004 Aceh tsunami was not merely a disaster. It was a geological execution. It was the moment when the ocean, the supposed cradle of life, became a weapon of incomprehensible power, demonstrating the brutal fragility of everything built upon the land. When the second terrible silence finally descended, all that remained was the evidence of the planet's fury and the lasting cold horror of 30 meters of dark water that came ashore and devoured a civilization.